Behind the master bedroom's firmly closed door, I overheard a death contract. It forced me to choose. Become the unfortunate victim of a hit and run tomorrow morning, or be the executioner who drags her behind bars tonight. Before the story begins, comment on what city or state you're from. I'd love to know. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so this channel can grow. The nights in the sprawling suburban house always felt colder than they should. It was as if the thick, insulated walls stored secrets that refused to share space with warmth. Ava pulled the thin comforter up to her chest, staring at the back of Ethan, whose shoulders rose and fell with the steady rhythm of deep sleep. Her husband could always sleep soundly, a luxury Ava hadn't truly possessed since they decided to move into this house 6 months ago to care for his mother, Helen, who claimed to be perpetually ill. Ava felt her throat go dry. A sharp thirst chased away the last vestiges of her drowsiness. With movements as slow as possible to avoid waking, Ethan, the man so gentle he often seemed fragile in front of his own mother. Ava slipped out of bed. The old hardwood floor creaked softly under her cold, bare feet. The hallway light was intentionally off, leaving only the dim glow from the garden lamps penetrating the stained glass window at the end of the corridor. As she passed Helen's room, located right next to the main bathroom, Ava's steps faltered. The solid oak door, usually shut tight, was slightly ajar, leaving a gap the width of a pinky finger. From within, she heard a sharp whisper, a stark contrast to the soft, loving voice Helen typically used when asking Ava to make her herbal tea in the morning. "Don't ask so many questions, Leo. I've calculated everything. The first payment was wired to your account this afternoon." Ava froze. The name belonged to her brother-in-law, Leo, the unemployed leech who was seemingly involved in something serious with his own mother. Ava held her breath. Her chest felt tight, as if the oxygen in the hallway had suddenly vanished. Tomorrow morning, right at 7:15 a.m., when she leaves for work, she'll take the usual route, that quiet access road near the new mall construction. Helen's voice was flat, devoid of emotion, as if she were discussing a monthly grocery list. "When my daughter-in-law leaves for work tomorrow, hit her car hard enough to put her in a coma. Remember, a coma. Don't let her die instantly. We need time to handle the house deeds before it's too late." The world around Ava seemed to crumble. Her head rang violently. The words hit her car, slammed into her psyche with the force of 1,000 tons. Instantly, a memory she had long buried clawed its way out like pus from an old wound. She saw the black asphalt, wet with rain, heard the deafening screech of tires, and saw her father's body lying helpless after a hit and run 10 years ago. That trauma, the sense of loss that had nearly derailed her life, was now choking her again. She leaned her back against the hallway wall, fighting hard not to faint. Her heart pounded so furiously she feared its beat could be heard inside the room. "Why?" she asked her shattered heart. All this time, Ava had given everything. She worked overtime in the finance department of a logistics firm just to cover the mortgage on this house and Helen's fake medical bills. She had even held her tongue when Helen relentlessly pushed her to sell the house her father had left her to help with Leo's perpetually failing business ventures. "Ethan must not know." Helen's voice sounded again, lower this time. "That boy is too soft. He'll cry for days, but after that, he'll depend completely on me. As soon as Ava is in the hospital, I'll make sure all the assets are transferred to Ethan's name, which means they'll be mine too." Ava bit her lower lip until the metallic taste of blood filled her mouth. The physical pain helped keep her conscious. She realized a horrifying truth. Ethan, the husband she loved so dearly, was just a pawn on his mother's chessboard. Ethan, who always said, "She's a single mother, Ava. She's just afraid of being lonely," was completely blind to the monster he called Mom. Footsteps sounded from within the room. Helen seemed to be walking toward the door. Driven by a primal survival instinct, Ava rushed back to her room, ignoring the thirst that had tormented her. She slipped back under the covers, shutting her eyes tightly, just as she heard Helen's bedroom door close with a final, definitive click. In the darkness of the room, Ava cried without a sound. Her tears soaked the pillow, but her brain was working with a speed she had never felt before. She was no longer the naive Ava. She was a woman who had once lost everything in an accident, and she swore she would not let history repeat itself. She glanced at her phone on the nightstand. 2 a.m. 6 hours until the time Helen had scheduled for the destruction of her life. The fear slowly began to morph into a cold, calculated rage. She remembered Chloe, her best friend, who had always warned her about Helen's manipulative nature, warnings Ava had always ignored for the sake of marital harmony. Ava turned on her side, looking at Ethan's back. She had an urge to wake him, to scream in his ear about his mother's vile plan, but she knew it was pointless. Ethan wouldn't believe her without proof. Without proof, Ava would just be dismissed as crazy or hateful. Ava rose slowly and went to her vanity. With a hand that still trembled slightly, she fumbled in the bottom drawer for something small but crucial. She took out a spare key to Ethan's car that she always kept. In the darkness, her eyes glinted with determination. If they wanted an accident, Ava would give them a show, but with a script she wrote herself. She picked up her phone. Her fingers moved quickly, opening her messaging app. She didn't text the police. Not yet. She sent a short message to the one person she knew had the equipment she needed. * Chloe. I need the dash cam and the smallest voice recorder you have at your office. I'll pick it up in front of your complex in 15 minutes. Don't ask why. My life is on the line. * Ava got up, changing from her pajamas into dark-colored clothes. She wouldn't be going to the bathroom. She would not allow herself to become a victim for a second time. As she stepped out of her room with extreme care, she no longer felt like frightened prey. She was a hunter setting a trap. She passed Helen's room once more. This time she paused, not to eavesdrop, but to stare at the oak door with a sharp gaze. Behind that door was the woman who wanted to put her in a coma. In the room next door was a husband too weak to protect her. And within herself was a daughter who was tired of being a victim. Ava descended the stairs with firm steps, heading for the garage. She grabbed her own car keys. Then an idea crossed her mind. She wouldn't use her car tomorrow morning. She would switch positions. She picked up the keys to Leo's beat-up car, which he often left on the living room table, the car whose payments she had secretly helped cover. With calm movements, she popped the hood and disconnected one of the cables, ensuring the vehicle wouldn't start when Leo needed it to chase her down. A small obstacle, but enough to start the chaos she planned. The morning sun pierced the gap in the bedroom curtains with a light that felt more searing than usual. For Ava, that light was no longer the sign of a new day, but the slow, tolling bell of her own demise. She hadn't truly slept a wink all night. Every time she tried to drift off, Helen's raspy voice ordering Leo to hit her car echoed in her mind, making her heart drop and a cold sweat break out on her back. She turned to Ethan, who had just woken up and was stretching slowly. He looked so innocent, so sinless with his sleepy face. Her mind was at war. Should she hug him and tell him everything? But the image of Ethan always defending his mother with his signature line, "She just loves you too much, Ava," made her tongue feel heavy. In this house, truth was a luxury item that wouldn't be believed without tangible proof. "Morning, honey. You're already up? Dressed so formally?" Ethan asked, yawning. Ava forced a smile. She was already wearing her work blouse, a fabric shield she hoped could protect her today. "Yeah, hun. There's a lot of work at the office that has to be done before 9 a.m. "That's great. You've always been so diligent," Ethan praised without a care in the world. Ava went to the mirror, applying a slightly brighter red lipstick than usual to hide her pale face. She had to look normal. She had to be a better actor than Helen. As she stepped out of the room and headed to the dining area, the aroma of bacon and freshly brewed coffee filled the air. A scent that was usually comforting now felt like the sickening smell of formaldehyde. At the dining table, Helen was already sitting gracefully in her favorite silk robe. Her aged, fragile face broke into a warm smile when she saw Ava. Beside her, Leo sat with puffy eyes, his hand occasionally trembling as he held his fork. Leo, the brother-in-law whose gambling debts Ava had often helped pay off out of pity, now sat there as her would-be murderer. "Ava, come sit. I made your favorite pancakes." Helen's voice was so soft, overflowing with attention. "I heard you going back and forth to the bathroom last night. Are you not feeling well, dear?" Ava pulled out a chair, sitting directly across from the woman who had just scheduled her death. Just thirsty, Helen. Maybe because it's been so warm. Oh, thank goodness. I was so worried. That's why I prepared a special packed lunch for you today. Helen pushed a bright red lunchbox toward her. It's got fried chicken and that potato salad you like. Don't eat out, okay? I want you to have a home-cooked meal today. Ava stared at the lunchbox. In her eyes, it wasn't food but a symbol of her compliance being tested. She could feel Leo's gaze, his head perpetually bowed, avoiding eye contact. He looked anxious, his foot tapping restlessly under the table. Thank you, Helen. You didn't have to go to all this trouble, Ava replied flatly. It's no trouble at all for my favorite daughter-in-law, Helen replied, the crinkles at the corners of her eyes looking utterly sincere. Ethan joined them at the table, immediately grabbing a piece of toast. He glanced at his watch hurriedly. Ava, it's already 7:15. If you take that access road, you can get to the office early before traffic gets crazy in front of that mall project. Ava's heart skipped a beat. Asterisk. The access road near the mall construction. Asterisk. The exact location mentioned in the phone call last night. Ethan had just confirmed her death route without realizing it. Was he doing it on purpose? Or was he just a tool moved by his mother to ensure the target was in the right place at the right time? He's right, Ava, Leo chimed in suddenly, his voice hoarse and unstable. I checked the navigation app earlier. The main road has pipe repairs. The access road is the safest and fastest option. Ava swallowed a lump that felt as hard as a rock. She looked at the three of them in turn. Ethan, busy with his toast. Helen, watching her with a deadly maternal smile. And Leo, looking like a coward forced to be an executioner. This house, which she had fought to renovate with her own sweat and tears, now truly felt like a predator's den. She was the only prey at the table. I'm leaving now, Ava said as she stood up. Her voice didn't tremble, an achievement she was grateful for. Be careful on the road, honey. Don't speed, Ethan said, kissing her forehead. A kiss that usually felt warm now felt as cold as ice. Remember, just take the access road, Ava. It's quieter, Helen added, her hand stroking Ava's arm in a possessive gesture. Ava gave a small nod, grabbing her car keys from the table and taking the red lunchbox. As she walked to the garage, she could feel 3 pairs of eyes watching her from the dining room window. She got into her car, immediately locked the doors, and leaned back in the driver's seat for a few seconds to regulate her breathing. Her hands gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. She started the engine. Her mind went back to the small recorder she had gotten from Chloe at dawn, a device now hidden behind a fold in her car's dashboard, active and ready to capture whatever happened. She had also made sure her dash cam was working in silent mode. Ava didn't back out of the driveway immediately. She reached into her bag and pulled out an old burner phone that neither Ethan nor Helen knew about. She opened a tracking app she had secretly linked to Leo's phone 2 days ago when he had passed out drunk on the sofa. The red dot on the screen showed that Leo's phone was still inside the house. Ava took a long, deep breath. She knew Leo would make his move as soon as she was out of the gate. With movements deliberately slowed to appear normal to those watching from behind the curtains, Ava pressed the gas pedal. But instead of heading toward the access road her husband had suggested, Ava turned the wheel in the opposite direction, toward a crowded supermarket parking lot with multiple entrances and exits. There, she parked her car in the darkest corner, shielded by large delivery trucks. Ava didn't get out. She grabbed the red lunchbox from Helen, opened it with a trembling hand, and without hesitation, dumped its entire contents into a plastic trash bag under her seat. She then took a bottle of water and washed her hands, which felt dirty from touching the woman's offering. She sat in the stuffy silence of the car, staring at her phone screen. The red dot belonging to Leo started moving away from the house. Ava waited, alert. Her decision was made. She would not be a passive victim. She would follow the hunter, ensuring she was the one who pulled the trigger first. Ava started her car again, but this time she turned off her headlights. Even though it was early morning and slightly foggy, she slowly pulled out of the parking lot, keeping a safe distance so she wouldn't be seen, but close enough to monitor the direction of Leo's beat-up car, the one whose cable she had sabotaged last night, which had apparently been quickly fixed. Or perhaps Leo was using another vehicle she hadn't anticipated. The black asphalt in front of the supermarket was still damp with morning dew as Ava turned her steering wheel. She kept a distance of about 3 cars behind a silver SUV with heavily tinted windows. It didn't have a familiar license plate, but ever since Ava left her gate, the vehicle had been following the route she usually took to the office. Ava's breathing was short and ragged. She turned off the radio to hear her own engine, making sure there were no strange noises after her minor sabotage of Leo's car in the garage last night. But her guess had been wrong. Leo wasn't using his beat-up car. He had somehow gotten access to this silver SUV. Ava saw the SUV slow down as it approached the mall construction area, right on the access road that Ethan and Helen had suggested at the breakfast table. The road was deserted, flanked by the project's corrugated metal fence, and an empty lot overgrown with chest-high weeds. The SUV pulled over to the shoulder of the road, stopping under the shadow of a large tree. Ava stopped her car far behind, around a corner by a storefront, and killed the engine. Her hand gripped the burner phone. From a distance, the SUV's door opened slightly. Someone got out to smoke. And even though the man wore a black cap pulled down low, Ava recognized the shabby denim jacket. "That's Leo. It's really you, Leo," Ava whispered, her voice catching in her throat. Leo looked agitated. He repeatedly checked his watch and stared down the main road, waiting for Ava's car to pass. A wave of intense nausea hit Ava's stomach. Her brother-in-law, whom she often gave spending money to, for whom she often made coffee when he stayed up late in the living room, was now waiting there to ram her car until she was in a coma. After waiting for 15 minutes without any sign of Ava, Leo slammed his cigarette butt onto the asphalt. He got back in the car and made a rough U-turn. Ava immediately ducked behind the steering wheel to avoid being seen. The SUV sped off, back toward their neighborhood. Ava didn't go to the office. She called Chloe, her hand trembling. "Chloe, I'm not coming in today. Can you let HR know for me? Tell them I have a sudden family emergency," Ava said quickly before Chloe could ask questions. "Ava, where are you? You sound strange." Chloe's worried voice came from the other end. "I'm following them, Chloe." It was true. Leo was going to do it. "I'll call you back later." Ava hung up. She turned her car around, following the silver SUV from a very safe distance. Leo was apparently going back home. Ava didn't dare enter through the front. She parked her car 2 blocks from their house, in front of a small park, rarely visited during work hours. Stealthily, Ava walked around to a narrow alley that bordered the back fence of her house. Luckily, she knew there was a gap between the overgrown vines and a slightly rotten wooden fence panel in the corner of the backyard. It was a spot she often used to feed stray cats. Ava pressed her body against the cold wall. Through the wooden slat, she could see the backyard area Helen usually used to dry her medicinal herbs. Helen was already there, waiting. Her face was no longer adorned with the gentle smile from the breakfast table. It was tense and full of anger. Leo walked toward his mother with hurried steps. "She didn't come that way, Mom. I waited until 7:45, but her car never showed up," Leo exclaimed in a frustrated tone. Ava immediately activated the video recording mode on her phone, pointing the small lens through the gap in the fence. "Impossible." "Ethan said she left early," Helen replied sharply. "Are you sure you didn't miss her?" "I'm not blind, Mom. I know what her car looks like. She didn't take the access road. Maybe she took the main road because she's suspicious." Helen snorted, her arms crossed in front of her chest. "Suspicious? How could she be suspicious? You must have been careless. Or maybe she stopped somewhere first. Useless. Don't blame me, Mom. I risked my neck with this rental car. If the cops find out this is an unregistered vehicle, I'm the one who goes to jail," Leo retorted, his voice rising. Ava held her breath. An unregistered rental. So that's why Leo wasn't using his own car. "Quiet, you," Helen snapped. "Listen to me. If this morning failed, we'll do it tomorrow morning. But this afternoon, when she comes home from work, I want you to make sure her car's brakes completely fail. I'll ask her to go grocery shopping with me this afternoon, using her car. I'll get out in front of the store. Then, when she continues home alone, let the accident happen on the downhill stretch near the river." Leo was silent for a moment, then nodded slowly. "The money, Mom. I need more. I lost big on a bet last night. The loan sharks are already looking for me. Helen pulled a thick envelope from her robe pocket and threw it at Leo. That's an additional advance. Make sure it doesn't fail this time. I don't want to see that arrogant daughter-in-law's face in this house anymore. She thinks she's so great just because she controls the family finances. She's just a stranger in Ethan's house. Ava stopped the video recording as they both went inside. Her entire body was shivering, not just because of the murder plot, but because of Helen's insult. All this time, her devotion, her salary that she used to support them, was seen as a form of arrogance by her mother-in-law. Ava rested her head against the rough fence wall. She felt utterly alone. Ethan wasn't here to defend her. Ethan was at work, probably thinking how lucky he was to have such a caring mother and a diligent wife. He had no idea that behind these walls, a bloody conspiracy was being orchestrated to eliminate his wife. Ava wiped away a tear. The fear that had tormented her since last night was beginning to crystallize into something harder. She couldn't just run anymore. If she kept avoiding them, they would find another, more cunning way. Ava walked back to her car, her mind racing. She looked at her phone, at the video she had just taken. It was the first piece of evidence she had. But she knew it wasn't enough to put Helen in prison for a long time if their family lawyer, Mr. Davies, got involved. She had to go back into that house. She had to pretend that everything was fine, as if she had just experienced a technical problem on the road that morning. She had to be near them to know every detail of their movements. Ava started her car. Instead of driving away, she headed for the front gate of her own home. She stopped right in front of it, honking once with a steady hand. When the gate opened and she saw Leo's surprised face as he was about to leave again, Ava just offered a thin, cold smile from behind the car window. She parked her car in the garage and stepped inside. In the living room, Helen was sitting, sipping her tea, looking utterly shocked to see Ava. "Ava, you're home already? Didn't you just leave for work?" Helen asked, trying hard to normalize her tone. Ava placed her bag on the table, looking directly into her mother-in-law's eyes. "My car broke down near the convenience store, Helen. Seems to be an engine problem, so I decided to come home and call a mechanic for this afternoon." Ava walked to the kitchen, got a glass of water, then turned back to face Helen, who now looked extremely agitated. "Oh, by the way, Helen," Ava said calmly, "I saw a silver SUV that looked just like the one Leo was driving pass by the convenience store. Does Leo have a friend who rents out cars like that?" The question made the teacup in Helen's hand tremble slightly, creating a faint clinking sound against its saucer. Ava didn't wait for an answer. She went upstairs, entered her room, and locked the door. Inside, she took a small screwdriver from a toolkit she kept under the bed. The cold bedroom floor seemed to seep into her bones as Ava knelt in the corner of the room, clutching the small screwdriver from her toolkit. Her breath was still ragged. The adrenaline from confronting Helen in the living room hadn't subsided. Behind the locked wooden door, she could faintly hear the sound of footsteps in the corridor, footsteps she believed belonged to an anxious Leo. This house, which was supposed to be her sanctuary after a long day's work, now felt like a death maze, with walls that were slowly closing in, ready to crush her. Ava stood and looked at her reflection in the mirror. She looked years older. There was a line of fear she tried to cover with a thin layer of powder, but her eyes couldn't lie. They now radiated the alertness of prey that had just spotted the predator's fangs in the bushes. She knew that if she just stayed in her room, they would devise a third, possibly neater, plan. She had to make them panic. She had to disrupt their rhythm. That afternoon, at precisely 4 p.m., Ava left her room with her work bag slung over her shoulder. In the living room, Helen was sitting with Ethan, who had just come home from work early. He appeared to be massaging his mother's shoulders, a sight that usually warmed Ava's heart, but now only induced nausea. "Hun, Mom, I'm heading to the auto shop for a bit. The mechanic said my car needs a closer look because there's a problem with the braking system," Ava said, her tone deliberately tinged with a little anxiety. Helen flinched slightly but quickly regained her composure. "Oh, all right. Be careful, dear. Leo said he was going out too. Do you want him to give you a ride?" "No need, Helen. It's close." Ava cut her off quickly. She glanced at Ethan, hoping her husband would offer to accompany her, or at least ask for more details. but Ethan only glanced over briefly without stopping his massage. "Okay, Ava, be quick. Mom's been worried sick about you all day because you came home suddenly this morning. Don't stress her out even more." Ava just nodded, her tongue feeling too heavy to reply. She walked out, started her car, and drove away. As soon as she hit the main road, she saw in her rearview mirror a motorcycle ridden by a figure in a denim jacket. Leo. He was following her. Ava didn't go to the auto shop. She drove to the largest shopping mall in the city, one with a massive parking garage that held thousands of vehicles. She sped into the parking labyrinth, driving up to the highest open-air level that was crowded, and parked her vehicle directly under the glare of a CCTV camera. She turned off the engine, locked the car, and walked quickly to the elevator. Instead of entering the mall, Ava exited through a ground-floor emergency door that led to a ride-sharing pickup spot. She ordered an Uber, set her phone to Do Not Disturb, and asked the driver to take her on a meandering ride for an hour, before finally dropping her off at home via a series of back roads that Leo couldn't possibly have followed. In the car, Ava stared at her phone screen, which was constantly lighting up with incoming calls she ignored. There were 10 missed calls from Ethan, 5 from Helen, and a dozen texts from Leo asking where she was. She could imagine the panic on Leo's face when he lost her trail in the parking garage. Panic was an opening, and Ava needed that opening to see who would be the first to drop their mask. Ava arrived home close to 9 p.m. The atmosphere in the house was tense. The porch lights were on brightly, and she could see Ethan's car parked haphazardly, as if he had slammed on the brakes. As soon as Ava stepped through the front door, she was met with a heavy silence before Ethan's shout broke the air. "Where have you been, Ava?" Ethan stood in the middle of the living room, his face red with rage. Behind him, Helen sat on the sofa, clutching her chest as if she were short of breath, a trembling glass of water in her hand. "Your phone was off. You said you were just going to the auto shop, but our regular place said you never showed up. Mom fainted earlier from worrying about you, that something happened to you on the road." Ethan walked toward Ava, his voice rising with a rare anger. Ava stood silently, looking at him with an unreadable expression. She searched for a flicker of genuine concern in her husband's eyes, but all she found was annoyance that his and his mother's comfort had been disturbed. "I had an urgent matter, Ethan. I met up with Chloe because some work files were left in her car," Ava answered in a low voice, trying to maintain her composure. "Couldn't you have sent a text? You know Mom has a heart condition. You're being so selfish, Ava." Ethan snapped again, this time pointing at Helen. "Look at her. Because you disappeared without a word, Mom was scared to death. She was afraid you'd get in an accident, just like your father." That last sentence was like a blade twisting in Ava's gut. How could Helen use her greatest trauma as a weapon to corner her, when she herself was planning a similar accident? Helen began to sob, her voice hoarse and pitiful. "It's all right, Ethan. Don't yell at Ava. It's my fault for being too sensitive. I was just scared. I was just afraid of losing a daughter-in-law as good as Ava. It's not your fault, Mom. Ava is being unreasonable." Ethan turned back to Ava. "Now, apologize to Mom. Now." Ava felt the world spin. She felt suffocated in her own home. She saw Leo standing in the doorway to the kitchen, his face pale and covered in a cold sweat, watching her with a probing gaze, trying to figure out if she knew something or if this was all a coincidence. Instead of crying or screaming, Ava felt an extraordinary cold spread through her heart. She realized one thing. In Ethan's eyes, she was no longer a wife who needed protection, but merely a source of disturbance for his mother. Ethan's allegiance was absolute, and that reality was more painful than Leo's hit-and-run plan. "I'm sorry, Helen," Ava said curtly, without emotion. She walked past Ethan without looking at him and went to the bathroom. Inside, she turned on the faucet full blast to drown out the sound of her sobs. She sank to the cold tile floor, hugging her knees. She remembered Chloe's words on the phone that afternoon. Asterisk, "Don't go back there, Ava. That's not a home. It's a lion's den." Asterisk. But Ava knew she couldn't run now. If she left, she would have no evidence to put them in jail. She had to stay, to collect the pieces of their crimes. Ava washed her face, staring at her reflection in the mirror with a gaze that was now harder. She picked up her work bag from the floor, reached into a small pocket, and pulled out a spare key to Helen's office cabinet, which she had secretly duplicated a few months ago while helping to clean. She knew that inside that cabinet was where all of Helen's asset documents and transfer records were kept. That night, when the entire house was asleep and Ethan was snoring beside her, his anger evaporated. Ava rose slowly. She wasn't going to the kitchen for a drink. She crept toward Helen's private study downstairs, carrying a small flashlight and the duplicate key. Her hand trembled, but her mind was focused. She knew if she were caught, it would be the end of everything. But if she did nothing, she was just a corpse waiting to be buried. Ava inserted the key into the wooden drawer's lock. A soft click sounded, as if it were the first crack in the wall of lies in that house. The click of the wooden drawer opening last night still echoed in Ava's ears, beating in time with her erratic heart. Inside that drawer, she had found not only a mountain of Leo's unpaid debt notices, but also an unsigned legal document. The document detailed the transfer of ownership of the house they lived in, a house that was legally Ethan's father's inheritance for Ethan and Ava to Helen. Absolutely. This morning, the atmosphere in the living room felt far more suffocating than usual. The scent of the aromatherapy diffuser Helen had lit usually created a sense of calm, but to Ava, it now smelled like funeral flowers. She sat on the sofa, her hands clenched in her lap. In front of her sat a middle-aged man in a tailored suit, holding an expensive-looking leather briefcase. The man was Mr. Davies, the family lawyer who had served Helen for over a decade. He wasn't just a legal advisor. From the way he sipped his tea with self-assurance and glanced at Ava with a condescending look, Ava knew he was her mother-in-law's trusted accomplice. "I don't think we need to beat around the bush, Mr. Davies said, pulling several folders from his briefcase. His voice was heavy, full of a manufactured authority. "Helen has told me everything. She is very concerned about the family's financial situation, especially with so much uncertainty out there." Ethan, sitting next to Mr. Davies, nodded quickly. His face was dull, as if he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders, but his eyes radiated blind obedience. "That's right, Ava. Mr. Davies is like family. He just wants to help us secure our assets. Mom said it would be better if the house was in her name for now, so that if anything happens to us, or if there's a lawsuit from your logistics job, the house will remain safe." Ava turned to Ethan. "A lawsuit from my job, Ethan? I work in finance, not in high-risk operations. What's the connection? It's just a preventative measure. Ava, Mr. Davies cut in with a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. He pushed a thick document in front of her. "This outlines the transfer of title as a gift to Helen. Legally, this will protect the house from seizure if your company runs into trouble someday. Helen just wants to ensure you and Ethan will always have a roof over your heads." Helen, who had been sitting in her rocking chair in the corner, began to sob softly, dabbing her eyes with a silk handkerchief. "I don't want what happened to your father to happen again, Ethan. Back then, because the assets weren't in order, I almost lost everything when he passed away so suddenly. I just want to protect you both." Ava stared at the document, her eyes fixed on one small clause stating that in the event of an inability to manage assets on the part of the first parties, Ava and Ethan, full control would fall to Helen. Asterisk. Inability to manage assets. Asterisk. The legal term suddenly morphed into the word times in Ava's mind. If Leo's plan had succeeded that morning, if she had been hit and ended up helpless in a hospital, Helen would only need this signature to completely erase Ava's rights. This wasn't about asset security. It was about clearing the path. They wanted her assets, and they wanted her gone from the picture without a trace of ownership. "Why now, Mr. Davies?" Ava asked, her voice steadier than she expected. "And why just this house? Isn't the commercial property downtown also in my and Ethan's name?" Mr. Davies cleared his throat, looking slightly annoyed by Ava's critical questions. "The storefront is another matter. This house is the primary asset. Helen just wants peace of mind. At her age, stress over asset uncertainty could worsen her health." "Ava, please." Ethan touched her hand, but she slowly pulled it away. "Don't make Mom sad again. Yesterday you disappeared without a word and made her faint. Now, show that you're really part of this family. It's just a signature. It doesn't mean we're being kicked out. Ava felt as if she'd been hit with a sledgehammer. Ethan wasn't just blind. He was actively bulldozing the path for his mother's plan. The man she loved was asking her to place her own neck on the executioner's block. I need time to read this, Mr. Davies, Ava said, closing the folder. There are a lot of legal terms I don't understand. I'll take it to the office tomorrow to study it. Mr. Davies's face instantly hardened, his professional smile vanishing. Ava, this document is a confidential family matter. It shouldn't be taken out and shown to others. I am here to explain it, not to give you study material. Yeah, Ava, Mr. Davies is right here. What else do you need to ask? Ethan started to sound impatient. Just sign it now. Mom has been waiting since this morning. Helen rose from her rocking chair, walking slowly toward Ava. She placed a hand on Ava's shoulder, gripping it with a strength unusual for a woman her age. Ava, dear, don't you trust me? Do you think I would ever harm you? The whisper felt cold against her ear. Asterisk. You are going to harm me. Asterisk. Ava screamed silently. She could feel Leo's gaze from behind the kitchen curtain, watching with anticipation, hoping the document would be signed so his debts could be settled with the house deed as collateral. Ava stood up, shaking Helen's hand off her shoulder. It's not that I don't trust you, Helen, but as a finance person, I was trained never to sign anything without full understanding. Ethan, if you want to sign your part, go ahead. But for my part, I need time. The living room fell silent. Ethan stared at Ava in disbelief, while Helen sat back down and covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking with deliberately loud sobs. You're unbelievable, Ava, Ethan snapped. You're being completely selfish. Mom asks for this one thing as proof of your devotion, and you suspect us. Mr. Davies gathered his papers with a rough motion. Very well. If that's your attitude, I can't force you. But you should know, this delay will only complicate Ethan's position if an emergency occurs. I will return in 2 days. I hope by then you'll have realized what's more important, your ego or your family. Mr. Davies walked out, followed by Ethan, who kept apologizing on his wife's behalf. In the living room, only Ava and Helen remained. Her mother-in-law slowly lowered her hands. There were no tears, only a cold, sharp, hate-filled stare. You think you're clever, don't you, Ava? Helen asked in a very low voice, almost a hiss. You're only delaying the inevitable. In this house, there's no place for someone who doesn't know how to be grateful. Ava didn't reply. She turned and walked to her room. She knew her refusal today had sped up the hourglass of her death. Helen and Leo wouldn't wait 2 days. They would act faster now that the subtle plan through Mr. Davies had been thwarted by her critical nature. Inside her room, Ava immediately locked the door. She grabbed her phone and sent a short text to Chloe. Asterisk, Chloe, they just tried to make me sign over the house. The pressure is insane. I need you to run a background check on a lawyer named Davies. I'm sure he has a weak spot. Asterisk. Ava then opened a drawer, taking out a tiny, button-sized camera she had bought from Chloe that morning. With swift, precise movements, she attached it to a corner of the ceiling, hidden by an ornate wooden molding, pointing directly at the door. If Ethan or anyone else entered while she was gone, she would know. But her next step was the riskiest. Ava took a spare folder she had managed to snatch from Mr. Davies's briefcase while he was busy calming Helen. She knew he would notice it was missing soon. Ava slipped the document behind the thin lining of her work briefcase. Then she walked to the window, looking down at Leo's car, its engine now being warmed up. Ava knew she couldn't just defend. She had to start attacking. She grabbed her own car keys and left the room, her face deliberately calm, as if she were just going to the convenience store. But her destination was far more dangerous than that. Ava drove with hands that still trembled violently. Beside her, in the work bag on the passenger seat, lay the document she had stolen from Mr. Davies, a blueprint for the annihilation of her rights. Every time she glanced at the bag, she felt like she was carrying a ticking time bomb. Her mind kept replaying Helen's cold stare in the living room, a look that no longer hid hatred, but projected death. She parked in an office complex downtown where Chloe worked as the head of the tech department for a private security firm. Chloe was the only person with no emotional ties to Ethan's family, making her Ava's only anchor to logic. As soon as she entered Chloe's soundproof office, Ava's defenses crumbled. She dropped her bag and sank into a guest chair, gasping for breath. "They're trying to kill me, Chloe." "Legally through Davies and physically through Leo," Ava whispered, her voice hoarse, almost gone. Chloe, a woman with short hair and a sharp, objective gaze, immediately locked her office door. She took the document from Ava's bag and read it carefully. "This is more than just an asset transfer, Ava. There's an absolute power of attorney clause. If you're declared medically incapacitated, like in a coma, Helen would have the full right to pull the plug if she wanted to. This is evil." Ava closed her eyes. The nausea returned. "Last night I heard them planning a hit and run. This morning Leo was waiting for me on the access road. And now this lawyer is pressuring me to sign over the house. And Ethan is defending them." Chloe put the document down and looked Ava straight in the eye. "That's your biggest problem right now, Ava. Not Leo, not Davies, but Ethan." "Ethan doesn't know anything, Chloe. He's just being manipulated by his mother," Ava defended, though her heart ached. "And that's the biggest threat," Chloe cut in sharply. "Ethan is the one who will open the door for your murderer because he thinks the killer is just delivering flowers. His passivity, his inability to stand with you against his mother, is the deadliest weapon Helen has. As long as Ethan is his mother's shield, you can't win by just avoiding them." Ava was silent. Chloe's words struck the most fragile part of her soul. She still loved Ethan, or at least she loved the memory of the man she married. But the fact that he would rather make his wife cry to calm his mother's fake sadness was a wound deeper than Leo's threats. "I can't run, Chloe. I have to get proof that can destroy Davies, too. He's their legal key," Ava said, her tone now harder. Chloe nodded and went to her storage cabinet. She pulled out a small box containing 5 microscopic wireless cameras, resembling tiny screws or pinholes on a picture frame. "These are IP-based cameras. You can monitor them live from the burner phone I encrypted for you. Plant them in strategic places, the living room, the kitchen, and if you can, inside Helen's bedroom. We need a recording of them explicitly planning something," Chloe explained, showing her how the app worked. DDA. That afternoon, Ava returned home with her heart pounding twice as fast. She had to do this while the house was empty. Fortunately, Ethan texted that he was taking Helen for a doctor's checkup because her blood pressure had spiked a result of the argument over the assets. Leo was also nowhere to be seen, likely at a gambling den or planning the brake sabotage she had overheard. Ava moved quickly. She started in the kitchen. With a trembling hand, she attached a tiny camera behind a wall decoration facing the dining table, where Helen and Leo often whispered. Her hand was sweating, causing the camera's adhesive to slip, triggering a brief panic in her chest. "Calm down, Ava. Don't let them win," she whispered to herself. She placed the second camera in the living room, hidden inside an artificial flower vase on a high shelf. From this angle, she could monitor any interactions with Mr. Davies if he returned. The hardest part was standing in front of Helen's bedroom door. The room always smelled of lavender oil and jasmine, scents now synonymous with betrayal. Ava entered as quietly as a cat. Her eyes scanned the tidy room. She attached the third camera in a crevice of the ornate wooden wardrobe, pointing directly at the bed and Helen's telephone table. As she was about to leave, she noticed a slightly open drawer on the vanity. Inside lay an unlabeled pill bottle. Ava remembered Helen always claimed to have a heart condition, but the bottle looked suspicious. Without a second thought, she took her phone, photographed the bottle, and quickly left, closing the door just as she heard the sound of the front gate opening. It was Ethan's car. Ava rushed to her room upstairs, threw her bag on the bed, and pretended to be changing clothes when Ethan walked in. "Mom's resting downstairs." "She's very weak, Ava," Ethan said as he entered the room, his face tired and reproachful. "The doctor said she's under severe stress. You should have been more lenient about that document. How hard is it to sign for Mom's peace of mind?" Ava turned to face her husband. "What about my peace of mind, Ethan? Did you ever ask how I felt being pressured by a lawyer in my own home?" Ethan sighed heavily, a gesture of boredom that was incredibly painful to Ava. "We'll talk about this later. I'm going to take a shower. Please make some warm tea for Mom and take it to her room. Show that you still have some sense of care." Ava didn't argue. She went downstairs to the kitchen and brewed the jasmine tea Ethan requested. But as she stood by the stove, her eyes glanced at her burner phone, which she had placed in a corner of the kitchen counter, hidden behind a stack of cookbooks. The screen displayed the view from the camera in the living room. Ava saw Leo enter through the front door, looking agitated. He approached Helen, who apparently wasn't as weak as Ethan had claimed. Helen was standing tall near the sofa, waiting for Leo. Ava held her breath, staring at the phone screen, her hand gripping the edge of the kitchen counter. Their voices weren't clear yet because she hadn't installed an additional microphone, but from their body language, a new tension had emerged. She saw Helen give a key to Leo, a key she recognized as the one to the storage shed in the backyard where the tools were kept. Ava knew that shed was where all the chemical fluids and metal-cutting tools were stored. Ava picked up the tea tray. Instead of feeling scared, a burning anger now simmered in her tight chest. She walked toward Helen's room to deliver the tea, passing Ethan, who was engrossed in his phone on the living room sofa, completely blind to the scene Ava had just witnessed on her secret phone screen. As she placed the tea on Helen's nightstand, the old woman looked at her with a small, triumphant smile. "Thank you, Ava. You truly are a devoted daughter-in-law. It would be a shame if this devotion had to be cut short by a tragedy." Ava just smiled back thinly, much calmer than before. "You should take care of your health too, Helen. We wouldn't want that tragedy to befall the wrong person." Ava walked out, closing her mother-in-law's door and reaching into her pocket. She pulled out the duplicate key to the backyard shed, which she had managed to grab from the spare key rack in the kitchen while making the tea. She knew it was risky, but she had to know what Leo was preparing in that shed tonight. Ava's grip on the cold duplicate key to the backyard shed felt like she was holding a piece of her own life. Helen's last words in the room were no longer just a taunt, but a declaration of war. In this house, every breath she took felt like it had to be paid for with an exhausting level of vigilance. Ava stood in the dim hallway, looking at the main bathroom door from which the consistent sound of the shower could be heard. Helen was showering. Ethan was still in the living room, absorbed in a news broadcast on the television, its volume turned up. This was a very narrow window, a thin gap between death and survival. Ava knew if she were caught now, she wouldn't get a second chance. But if she let tonight pass without additional proof, tomorrow morning she might already be under the wheels of the silver SUV driven by Leo. With silent steps, Ava entered Helen's room, which still smelled of the suffocating jasmine tea and aromatherapy. Her eyes immediately fixed on her mother-in-law's smartphone lying on the nightstand, right next to the unlabeled pill bottle she had photographed earlier. Her heart pounded so hard she felt she might faint. Ava grabbed the phone. The screen was locked. She tried entering Ethan's birthday. Failed. She tried the birthday of Ethan's late father. Also failed. A cold sweat beaded on her forehead. She heard the water in the bathroom suddenly stop. Panic began to creep in. She tried one last combination. Her and Ethan's wedding anniversary. A great, heart-wrenching irony washed over her as the phone's screen unlocked with that code. Helen was using Ava's happiest day as the key to hide all her wickedness. Ava moved with lightning speed. She opened the banking app, which thankfully hadn't been automatically logged out. Her eyes widened at the remaining balance. It was far less than what should have been there if the money from Ava's salary was being used for medical treatments. She quickly checked the transfer history for the past 3 days. There were 3 large transfers to an account in the name of Leo Pratama. The small note on each transaction made Ava's blood boil. Asterisk. Advance for operational. Unregistered SUV rental asterisk. And the last one, sent just an hour ago. Asterisk. Success bonus. Complete tomorrow. Asterisk. This isn't just a verbal threat, Ava whispered, her voice trembling. This is organized crime. They're literally buying my life with my own sweat and money. She immediately took her burner phone and photographed every line of the transactions with a violently shaking hand. She also found text messages between Helen and Leo. Asterisk Leo. The car's brakes are tampered with, Mom. If she doesn't take the access road tomorrow, at least she'll crash on the river downhill. Asterisk, asterisk. Helen. Good. Make sure Davies is ready with the house documents as soon as the news breaks. Ethan must continue to believe this was a pure accident. Asterisk. Ava felt the world spin around her. This betrayal was so deep, it pierced her very marrow. She wasn't just facing a mother-in-law who hated her. She was facing a family syndicate led by the woman she called Mom. Suddenly, the sound of the bathroom doorknob turning. Ava jolted. With a reflex driven by survival instinct, she placed the phone back in its exact position and leaped toward the wardrobe, pretending to be straightening a silk robe hanging on the outside. Helen emerged with a towel wrapped around her head. Her freshly washed face instantly turned wary upon seeing Ava in her room. "What are you doing in here, Ava?" Helen asked, her voice cold, her eyes narrowing suspiciously. Ava turned, holding the fabric with a forced smile. "Oh, Helen, this robe. The seam was coming undone. I thought I'd help mend it while you were showering. I didn't want you to have trouble with it later." Helen walked closer. Her gaze shifted from her phone on the nightstand back to Ava's face. She seemed to be searching for a flicker of a lie in her daughter-in-law's eyes. "You're too diligent, Ava. Sometimes, people who are too diligent are suspicious. You didn't touch any of my things, did you?" "Of course not, Helen. Why would you say that?" Ava tried a small laugh, though her heart was screaming in fear. "I just want to be helpful." Helen picked up her phone, checked it for a moment, then looked at Ava with a chilling, crooked smile. "Good. You know, surprises are the most wonderful thing in the world. I have many surprises for you tomorrow morning." Ava nodded and hurried out of the room. Once in the dark hallway, she leaned her back against the wall, gasping for air as if she had just run a marathon. The digital proof was now in her hands. The money transfers, the brake sabotage plan, and Davies's involvement were all recorded on her secret phone. But there was one huge problem: Ethan. She returned to the living room and saw Ethan laughing at a comedy show on TV. He looked so peaceful, so untouched by the storm battering his wife. Ava sat beside him, looking at her husband with an indescribable pain. "Ethan," Ava called softly. What is it, Ava? Why do you look so pale? Still thinking about the document?" Ethan wrapped an arm around her shoulder, but this time, the embrace felt like the coils of a snake. "Come on, we'll talk to Mr. Davies again tomorrow. Mom just wants what's best for us." "Ethan, if Mom were to do something evil to me, would you still defend her?" Ava asked, her eyes welling up. Ethan released his arm and sighed heavily, his expression turning annoyed again. "Ava, we've been over this. She's a single mother. She has no one but me and Leo. Why are you always so suspicious? Is it because of the trauma from your father's accident?" Ava fell silent. Ethan was using her trauma to silence her. This man would never believe her without a tangible explosion. Ava stood up, not wanting to prolong an argument that would only make her look insane in his eyes. She walked to the kitchen, got a glass of water, and stared at the closed shed door in the backyard. She remembered the duplicate key in her pocket. Leo might be done with her car's brakes, but Ava wasn't done with him. She remembered a name mentioned by Mr. Peterson, the family's former driver whom she had contacted via text message in a previous episode but hadn't met. Mr. Peterson was a witness to the past, someone who knew the secret behind the death of Ethan's father, which was eerily similar to what she was experiencing now. Ava opened her phone, typing a message to Chloe. *Chloe. Upload all these transfer proofs to your private cloud. I'm meeting Mr. Peterson first thing tomorrow morning before 7 a.m. I need to know what happened 10 years ago. If I can't wake Ethan up with present-day evidence, maybe a secret from the past can destroy Helen's influence over him. Ava drank her water down to the last drop. She realized that staying in this house was a deadly risk, but leaving without legally destroying Helen's reputation would only make the woman continue to hunt her. She had to stay here, playing the part of the obedient daughter-in-law, while underground, she was digging a grave for her own mother-in-law. That night, when Ethan was sound asleep, Ava didn't lie beside him. She sat at her small desk, opened her laptop, and began to compile a timeline of events since the first night she heard the whispers behind the door. She backed up the videos from the hidden cameras she had planted with Chloe. Suddenly, her burner phone vibrated. A notification from the living room camera. Ava looked at the screen. Leo re-entered the house, his clothes dirty with oil and dust. He spoke with Helen in the living room. Although their voices were inaudible, Leo handed a small metal object to Helen, a bolt that had been intentionally loosened. Helen accepted it with a wide smile and then stored it in the unlabeled pill bottle on her nightstand. Ava closed her laptop. She knew what she had to do. Tomorrow morning, she wouldn't take the access road, but she wouldn't let Leo lose her trail either. Ava took her car keys and then walked to a kitchen drawer. She took a small folding knife, typically used for cutting twine, and slipped it into the pocket of her work jacket. If she had to face the silver SUV directly tomorrow morning, she wouldn't let herself be hit without putting up a fight that would make Leo regret he was ever born into this family. That morning, a thin fog still hung over the asphalt, obscuring vision and concealing the malicious intent lurking around every corner. Ava left the house at precisely 5 a.m., long before Ethan's alarm went off and before Helen woke up to put on her maternal mask. She didn't touch her own car parked in the garage. The image of Leo tampering with the brake lines last night still haunted her like a waking nightmare. With quick steps and ragged breath, she walked to the main road to hail a conventional taxi, avoiding any digital trail her husband's family could track. In the taxi, Ava's hand still clutched the burner phone containing the recording of the operational transfer evidence. But even with the digital proof, there was a huge gap in her understanding that needed to be filled. Why? Why was Helen so obsessed with assets that she would plot a murder? The answer, according to Chloe's whispers and her own instincts, lay with Mr. Peterson. Mr. Peterson's house was in a crowded suburb, a small building with peeling paint but very neatly kept. The old man was sweeping his yard when Ava arrived. As soon as he saw her, Mr. Peterson froze. The broom in his hand fell. His wrinkled face suddenly turned pale, as if he had just seen a ghost from a past he desperately wanted to avoid. "Miss Ava," his voice trembled, hoarse with age. "Why have you come here? You shouldn't be looking for me." "Mr. Peterson, I don't have much time. My life is in danger," Ava said without preamble, her voice carrying a desperation so real it stopped him from closing the door. "Helen and Leo, they're planning an accident for me. Just like the accident that happened to Ethan's father 10 years ago, right?" Hearing his late employer's name, Mr. Peterson's shoulders slumped. He invited Ava into his small, dim living room. The smell of eucalyptus oil and old paper filled the space. Mr. Peterson sat on a plastic chair, his trembling hands clasped together. "I always knew this day would come," Mr. Peterson murmured, his eyes gazing far away. "Helen, she's not an ordinary woman. Miss, she has a sick sense of possession. Back then, the master, Ethan's father, wanted to divorce her because he couldn't stand her manipulative nature anymore. He wanted to sell the big house and divide the assets to start a new life." Ava held her breath. "Then what happened, Mr.?" Peterson looked at Ava with a gaze full of regret. "The night before the master died, I accidentally saw Helen in the garage. She was holding some tools. The next morning, the master left for the office alone. His brakes failed on the steep downhill road out of town. The police said it was a pure accident due to lack of maintenance. The world seemed to stop spinning for Ava. The nausea she had been suppressing now peaked. You knew the brakes were sabotaged, but you stayed silent. "I was scared, miss. I have a family," Mr. Peterson began to sob. "Helen threatened to frame me if I talked. She paid me to keep my mouth shut and quit immediately. But every night, I can't sleep. I see the master's face every time I close my eyes." Ava felt her spirit plummet to the bottom of the deepest chasm. She wasn't just dealing with a malicious mother-in-law, but a recurring sociopath with a history of bloodshed. The pattern happening to her now was a perfect repeat of history. First her own husband, now her daughter-in-law. Anyone who stood in the way of her control over assets and family dominance would be eliminated without hesitation. "Why didn't Ethan suspect anything?" Ava asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Helen is brilliant at playing the victim, miss. After the master died, she pretended to be depressed and became completely dependent on Ethan. She brainwashed him into believing that she was the only person who truly loved him. Ethan grew up with a misplaced sense of guilt and obligation," Mr. Peterson explained. Ava leaned against the hard back of the chair. This information shattered the last remnants of her hope for Ethan. If Ethan had been shaped by his mother's false narrative for 10 years, was it even possible for him to believe her? Ethan wasn't just a passive mama's boy. He was the product of long-term manipulation by a murderer. This reality made Ava realize how utterly alone she was in that house. Every smile from Helen, every packed lunch, every stroke on her head, it was all part of a pre-slaughter ritual. She felt dirty for ever having loved that woman. She felt stupid for working so hard to support a monster who had once killed the father of the man she loved. "Mr. Peterson, I'm begging you. When the time comes, will you give your testimony?" Ava asked, holding his cold hand. Mr. Peterson was silent for a long time, fear still evident in his eyes. But the guilt he had carried for a decade seemed to have reached its saturation point. "I'm an old man, miss. I don't want to die carrying this burden to my grave. If you can guarantee my family's safety, I will speak." Ava left Mr. Peterson's house feeling much heavier than when she had arrived. The sun was already high, showing it was 8:30 a.m. She had to get back before anyone noticed she was gone, but she knew she couldn't go home the usual way. As she walked to the nearest taxi stand, she passed a small bridge. Below, a river flowed swiftly. Ava paused, staring at the murky water. She remembered Helen's plan. Asterisk an accident on the downhill stretch near the river. Asterisk. Suddenly, her main phone rang. Ethan's name appeared on the screen. Ava took a deep breath, trying to normalize her voice before answering. "Hello, Ethan. Ava, where are you? Mom is panicking. Leo said he saw your car was still in the garage, but you weren't in the room. Why did you leave without saying anything?" Ethan's voice was full of a worry that was mixed with a blaming tone. "I felt short of breath, Ethan. I needed to take a short walk to get some fresh air. I'm almost home," Ava replied flatly. "Get home now. Mom is making a special breakfast. She said she wants to talk about Mr. Davies again. Don't make the atmosphere any more tense, Ava. Hurry up." Ava ended the call. She looked at the road, then at her car parked far away in her home's garage via a tracking app. She knew if she went back now, she would be walking into a second trap. But if she didn't go home, they would suspect she already knew everything. Ava made a very dangerous decision. She didn't call a taxi to take her to her front door. Instead, she ordered an Uber and asked to be dropped off at a small auto shop a few miles from her house, a shop owned by an old acquaintance. There, she met a mechanic she knew and gave him her spare car key. "Please pick up my car from my house once I get there. Don't let anyone see you. Check the brakes, record the whole process, and don't fix anything. I need the physical evidence to be fresh." Ava returned home using another rideshare, deliberately getting dropped off a good distance from the gate to avoid being seen. She walked into the yard, her heart pounding as she saw Helen standing on the porch, watering flowers with a face so serene, as if she hadn't just orchestrated the second murder plan of her life. "Ava, where have you been?" Helen asked without turning around, her voice as cold as ice despite its light tone. Ava stopped right behind her mother-in-law. She stared at the woman's neck, realizing that beneath that wrinkled skin lay a secret that could shatter their family into a million pieces. "Just a morning walk, Helen. Looking for answers to many things that have been bothering me." Ava stepped into the house, heading straight for the garage before Helen could react. She knelt beside her own car, felt under the front tire, and deliberately dropped her earring there to have an excuse if someone caught her. Sure enough, she felt something sticky on her fingertips, brake fluid, slowly leaking. Leo had done his job. The sticky, sharp-smelling brake fluid on her fingertips felt like a death sentence just handed down. Ava stood in the dim garage, staring at her own car with overwhelming horror. Behind the connecting door to the kitchen, she could hear Ethan's soft laughter and the clinking of a spoon against a plate. Such a domestic, normal scene, yet behind it lay a mechanism of murder, ticking down to zero. Ava wiped her fingers on a dusty rag in the corner of the garage until her skin was red, but the oily smell seemed to have seeped into her pores, just like Mr. Peterson's dark secret now settled at the bottom of her soul. She took a deep breath, composing her face before stepping inside. She had to talk to Ethan. One more time, one last chance for her husband to choose: be his wife's protector or remain a servant to his mother's crimes. Ethan was at the dining table, flipping through a newspaper while sipping coffee. Nearby, Helen was busy arranging fruit in a crystal bowl, looking pious and peaceful. "Where have you been, Ava? You were in the garage for a while," Ethan asked, without looking up from his paper. "Just checking the car, Ethan. I think there's a brake fluid leak," Ava replied flatly, her eyes darting toward Helen. The old woman showed no reaction. Her wrinkled fingers continued to peel an apple calmly, but Ava could feel the air suddenly thicken with tension. "The brakes again?" "I thought you just had them serviced last month," Ethan replied lightly. "It's probably just in your head because you're stressed about work. Don't be so paranoid, Ava." Asterisk. Paranoid. Asterisk. The word hit Ava like a slap. She pulled a chair out opposite Ethan, ignoring the plate of fruit Helen offered with a fake smile. "Ethan, can we talk alone in the bedroom?" Ava cut in, her voice laced with an urgency she couldn't hide. Ethan put down his newspaper with an annoyed gesture. "Mom isn't a stranger, Ava. If there's a problem, just talk about it here. Why do you have to be so secretive?" Ava swallowed hard. She glanced at Helen, who had now stopped peeling the apple and was looking at her with a convincingly inquisitive expression. "It's about Leo, Ethan, and the money that keeps flowing from our family account to him." Ethan's face instantly hardened. "Ava, how many times have I told you, Leo is my brother? He's going through a tough time. Mom is just helping him out a bit so he doesn't get into deeper trouble." "A bit? Tens of thousands of dollars for operational costs? For renting an unregistered car is a bit?" Ava's voice rose an octave. She couldn't hold it in anymore. "Ethan, have you ever wondered why your father had the same kind of accident? Brake failure on a downhill slope? Don't you see a strange pattern in this house?" Asterisk clang. Asterisk. The fruit knife in Helen's hand fell to the floor, its metallic sound deafening in the sudden silence. Helen covered her mouth, her eyes welling up with terrifying speed. "Ava, what are you implying, dear?" Helen's voice trembled violently. "Why are you bringing up my late husband's death? Are you accusing me of deliberately letting Ethan's father die?" "Ava, that's enough." Ethan shot up from his chair, his face red with rage. "You've gone too far. I know you're still traumatized by your father's accident 10 years ago, but don't use your pain to insult my mother." "A sociopath?" "Ava, you're accusing Mom of something that heinous?" Ava looked at Ethan with indescribable pain. The man before her was truly blind. 10 years of manipulation had killed his logical reasoning. "I'm not making baseless accusations, Ethan. Ask your mother what she sent Leo money for yesterday afternoon. Ask them what they were whispering about in the backyard, about putting me in a coma." Helen slumped into her chair, clutching her chest as if having a heart attack. "Ethan, I can't take this anymore. Why does Ava hate me so much? What did I do wrong?" Ethan rushed to his mother, kneeling and hugging her with great concern. He then turned to Ava, his eyes filled with hatred. "Look what you've done. You're completely insane, Ava. Your trauma has made you paranoid and cruel. You're jealous of the attention I give to my mother." "I'm not jealous, Ethan. I'm trying to save my life," Ava shouted, tears finally streaming down her cheeks. "Get out," Ethan roared. "Go to your room and don't come out until you can think clearly. I don't want to hear any more slander about Mom or Leo. They are my family, and if you can't respect them, then you don't respect me." Ava took a step back, her breath catching in her throat. She saw the scene before her husband tightly embracing a murderer who was acting like a victim. In that second, something inside Ava broke. The hope she had cherished that Ethan would be her hero vanished without a trace. She realized that in this house, she was completely and utterly alone. The internal conflict that had tormented her between her love for her husband and her desire to survive had reached its climax. If she kept trying to save Ethan, she would only drown with him. Ethan had chosen his side, and it wasn't beside his wife. Ava turned and walked toward the stairs without another word. Each step felt heavy, as if she were dragging the weight of all the lies in that house. She entered her room, locked the door, and leaned against it in the darkness. She wasn't crying anymore. A cold rage began to take over. She grabbed her burner phone, opening the video recording from the backyard and the photos of the transfer proofs she had taken from Helen's phone. She stared at the screen with a sharp, empty gaze. "All right," Ava whispered to the darkness. "If you choose to be destroyed with them, Ethan, I won't stop you. but I will not let myself be the sacrifice for your family's madness." She realized that to survive, she had to destroy the very foundation of this house. She had to destroy the image of the saintly mother that Ethan had worshipped for so long, even if it meant Ethan would lose his entire world. This was no longer about saving a marriage. It was about survival. Ava opened her laptop, the screen's glow illuminating her pale face. She began typing a long email to Chloe, attaching all the evidence she had. She also included Mr. Peterson's contact information, but there was one more thing she had to do. Ava got up, walked to her nightstand drawer, and took out a bottle of her own sleeping pills, which she rarely used. She stared at it for a long time. She remembered Helen's unlabeled pill bottle downstairs. A reckless idea formed in her mind. If they wanted to play with medicine and misfortune, then Ava would give them a variable they hadn't expected. Ava slipped out of her room very quietly, making sure Ethan was still busy comforting his mother downstairs. She walked to the main bathroom, where Helen's unlabeled pill bottle was usually kept before she went to bed. Ava's hand trembled as she swapped 2 of the pills inside the bottle, with vitamins of a similar shape but with a very different effect, when mixed with the herbal tea Helen usually drank. She had no intention of killing her. She just needed Helen to lose control of her act for a few hours so Ethan could see her true face when she was enraged. Ava closed the bottle, placing it back in its exact spot. As she walked back to her room, she passed Leo, who had just come in through the back door with a sour face. They locked eyes for a moment. Leo gave a thin smirk filled with menace, as if to say that tomorrow was Ava's last day. Ava simply returned a cold stare, then entered her room and locked the door. She lay down on the bed, waiting for morning to come, the morning that would be the beginning of the collapse of the family she once loved, or the end of her own life. The darkness in the bedroom felt so dense, as if the air had turned to a black liquid clogging Ava's lungs. Beside her, Ethan snored softly, a sound that usually brought comfort but now sounded like cruel mockery. He was fast asleep after having just spat the words times paranoid times and times insane times at his wife. He slept on the same pillow as the woman he was allowing to walk toward a cliff's edge. Ava had no more tears. They had dried up the moment she saw Ethan choose to hug his mother's shadow over his wife's reality. The pain had now mutated into a kind of deadly calm, the calm of a soldier in a trench who knows the enemy is just over the ridge. She reached for her burner phone hidden under the pillow. The dim light from its screen illuminated her pale, gaunt face. The wireless camera monitoring app was open. The view from the garage camera showed a sharp black and white image. The timestamp on the screen read 3:15 a.m. At first, there were only the static shadows of cardboard boxes and the silhouette of Ava's sedan. But a minute later, the connecting door from the kitchen opened slowly. A figure entered with extremely cautious steps. It was Leo. The brother-in-law, who had just yelled at her at the dining table, was now wearing a dark hoodie. He held a small toolbox, the one usually kept in the shed under the stairs. Ava felt her heart pound against her ribs with a painful rhythm. She pressed the record button on the app. On the screen, Leo knelt beside the front right tire of Ava's car. With a practiced skill that explained where the money for the mechanic course Ava had once paid for had gone, Leo began to crawl under the car. The faint sound of scraping metal came through the camera's sensitive microphone. Asterisk. Scrape. 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 Asterisk. Asterisk. You're really doing it, Leo. Asterisk. Ava whispered in her mind. Asterisk. You really want to kill me. Asterisk. A moment later, Helen appeared in the garage doorway. She didn't enter fully, just stood there like the angel of death overseeing her subordinate's work. The dim kitchen light behind her cast her in a monstrous silhouette, the bun on her head creating the illusion of horns. Is it done? Helen's voice came through the phone's speaker, thin but sharp. Leo crawled out, his face slick with oil. He grinned at his mother. Done, Mom. I didn't cut the brake line completely, just made a thin slice on the folded part. When she brakes hard on the downhill, the hydraulic pressure will make it rupture instantly. She won't have a chance to pump the brakes. Good, Helen replied coldly. Make sure there are no oil spills on the floor. Ethan is very particular about keeping the garage clean. Leo grabbed a dirty rag and meticulously wiped the remnants of brake fluid that had dripped onto the cement floor. Tomorrow morning, I'll follow her from behind on my motorcycle. Once she goes into the ravine on the river downhill, I'll make sure no witnesses get close until she's completely still. Ava covered her mouth with her hand to stifle a scream. Her body trembled violently. On her phone screen, she had just witnessed a theater of death in which she was the main character who wasn't supposed to know the script. The emotional pressure in her chest transformed. It was no longer just a sense of betrayal, but a primal rage demanding justice. She felt like she was watching strangers on that screen, not the family she had fed and sheltered in her own home. Suddenly, a notification buzzed on her main phone. A message from Detective Miller, a young detective and an acquaintance of Chloe's whom Ava had contacted earlier that evening. Miss Ava, I've seen the backyard recording you sent, but we need tangible evidence of physical sabotage to make an arrest before the fact. Do not use that car tomorrow morning. Ava typed a reply with stiff fingers. I am recording the brake sabotage live right now. I have the video. Is this enough? More than enough. Save the file in 3 different places. Do not confront them. Await my instructions tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. Ava saved the recording to her cloud storage, sent a copy to Chloe, and saved it on a hidden memory card. She looked at Ethan, still snoring. A wave of disgust washed over her. How could this man sleep so soundly while downstairs his family was designing a coffin for his wife? Ava got out of bed. Her decision was made. She would not be a victim, but she wouldn't run either. She had to ensure that when this storm broke, none of them could escape, including Ethan, who had chosen to be blind. She went to her vanity and picked up a silver brooch her father had given her, one with a sharp pin. Ava slipped out of her room, tiptoeing down the dark corridor to the ground floor. She didn't go to the kitchen, but to Ethan's home office. There, she took the spare key to Ethan's SUV, the car he was always so proud of. Ava knew that tomorrow morning, Ethan planned to take Helen to the farmer's market before heading to work. With calm, steady movements, Ava walked to the garage after making sure Leo and Helen were back in their rooms. The air in the garage still had the sharp smell of brake fluid. She looked at her own car, now a death trap. Ava didn't touch it. She approached Ethan's SUV, parked right beside it. With a hand that no longer trembled, she opened the unlocked driver's side door. She placed a small object under the driver's seat floor mat, an additional, already active voice recorder that would capture every conversation between Ethan and Helen during their trip tomorrow. But Ava didn't stop there. She knew she needed something more provocative to get the police to act before she was truly harmed. She took a small piece of paper, wrote something on it in neat capital letters, and slipped it into the gap between the steering wheel and the dashboard of Ethan's car. Ava went back upstairs, slipped under the covers, and closed her eyes. She knew her actions tonight could lead to an explosion of Ethan's anger or even accelerate Helen's plan, but she no longer cared. Ava grabbed her phone one last time, opened the navigation app, and changed the default route settings on Ethan's phone, which was lying on the nightstand. She redirected the route to the farmer's market to pass along the same downhill road planned for her accident. The rest of the night passed like a slow, torturous crawl of seconds. Ava remained awake, listening to every creak of the floorboards outside her room, imagining Leo or Helen sneaking in to make sure she was still breathing. When dawn broke, her head felt heavy, as if the burden of the secrets she carried had turned into molten lead filling her chest. Ethan woke up with a cold silence, a wordless statement that he still considered Ava the guilty party for his mother's stress. Ava went downstairs with her senses on high alert. She deliberately didn't touch her car keys, which were placed on the buffet. She wanted to see the look on Leo and Helen's faces when she didn't leave for work in the sabotaged vehicle. However, the death scenario she anticipated had shifted into something far more insidious. In the living room, it wasn't just Helen and Leo waiting. Mr. Davies, the lawyer with his sickeningly symmetrical smile, was already sitting there. On the coffee table, which usually held snacks, were several sheets of paper with the letterhead of a renowned psychiatric facility from the outskirts of the city. "Ava, please sit," There is something very serious we need to discuss as a family, Mr. Davies said, his voice deliberately low and full of false empathy. Ethan followed from behind, looking surprised, but then he just slumped down beside his mother. Helen herself was looking down, holding a handkerchief, her shoulders rising and falling as if she were holding back powerful sobs. "What is this now?" Ava asked. She didn't sit. She stood tall, her hands clenched at her sides. Mr. Davies adjusted his glasses. "Based on yesterday's events where you disappeared without notice, exhibited acute paranoid symptoms by accusing your own family of criminal acts, and your history of past trauma, Helen and Ethan are extremely concerned. We have consulted with a medical expert." Mr. Davies slid a signed document forward. "This is a letter for a psychiatric observation. It states that you are in an unstable mental state and require intensive treatment. We recommend you take an extended leave of absence and undergo treatment at the facility we have designated." Ava felt her heart stop for a moment. Asterisk. Mental illness. "You want to label me as insane. Asterisk. It's for your own good, Ava." Ethan finally spoke, his eyes red. "You've started imagining things that aren't real. You accused Leo of damaging the car's brakes, accused Mom of planning a murder. Those are all signs of delusion, Ava. Mr. Davies says if you don't get help soon, you could be a danger to yourself. Asterisk. Delusion. Asterisk." Ava laughed bitterly, a sound that echoed hollowly in the quiet room. "You're the ones planning my murder. And when I find out, you try to strip me of my legal rights by labeling me insane?" "Ava, please don't shout," Mr. Davies interjected with a calm, provocative tone. "This defensive and aggressive behavior only strengthens the medical report. If you refuse to cooperate, we can request assistance from medical personnel to escort you for everyone's safety." Ava looked at Helen. The old woman glanced at her for a second from behind her handkerchief. Behind those seemingly swollen eyes, Ava saw a flash of pure, unadulterated triumph. If Ava were declared mentally incompetent, all her recordings, photos, and testimonies would be dismissed as products of a sick mind. Mr. Davies had truly closed every legal loophole. The emotional pressure inside Ava's chest felt ready to explode. She felt cornered, like a hunted animal at the edge of a cliff as the hunters prepared their nets. She was on the verge of losing control and attacking Mr. Davies, but a vibration in her pocket brought her back to her senses. Her burner phone vibrated 3 times. It was the code from Chloe. Ava took a deep breath, trying to steady her voice. "I need time to read this document. I'm not signing anything right now. The signature is just a formality so your insurance can be claimed for the treatment costs, Ava," Mr. Davies said, holding out a pen. "Come on, be an adult. Don't make things harder for Ethan." Ava glanced at her phone with a subtle movement. A message appeared on the locked screen. Asterisk. "Play the audio I just sent. Now." Asterisk. Ava pretended to cough. She reached into her pocket and activated a small Bluetooth speaker she had previously hidden behind the flower vase in the living room. The device, connected to her burner phone, was controlled remotely by Chloe. An audio recording began to play, loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. Asterisk. "Don't worry, Helen. Once this mental incompetence document is official, all of Ava's testimony about her father's accident or Leo's plan will be considered garbage in court. A judge won't listen to a word from someone on a medical observation list." Asterisk. It was Mr. Davies's voice. Crystal clear. Asterisk. "Excellent, Davies. Here's the rest of the payment. $200,000. The remainder will be paid after she's actually in an isolation ward and the house deed is transferred to my name." Asterisk, Helen's voice replied. The atmosphere in the living room instantly turned ice cold. Mr. Davies's face, once calm, was now deathly pale. He whipped his head toward the flower vase, his eyes wide. Helen immediately dropped her crying act. She stood up, her face rigid, her eyes darting around, searching for the source of the sound. Ethan was frozen. He looked at his mother, then at Mr. Davies, then his gaze shifted to Ava. "Mom, was that your voice? What does this mean? $200,000 and the house deed?" Ava gave them no chance to answer. She immediately snatched the fake documents from the table before Mr. Davies could retrieve them. "This isn't a delusion, Ethan," Ava said, her voice now sharp as a dagger. "This is a conspiracy. Your mother paid your lawyer to make me look insane so they could steal your father's inheritance." Mr. Davies tried to grab Ava's hand. "That's a fake recording. It's an AI-edited fake. You can tell that to the police later, Mr. Davies," Ava retorted, backing away. Her internal conflict, once full of doubt, now hardened into cold resolve. She saw Ethan starting to waver. A massive crack had appeared in his faith in his mother. But Ava also knew that Helen wouldn't give up so easily. Helen suddenly let out a low laugh, a sound that was utterly terrifying. "You think one recording can destroy me, Ava? In this city, who is going to believe you? Ethan, are you going to believe that electronic gadget over the mother who gave birth to you?" Ethan looked devastated. He covered his face with his hands, sobbing, caught between two conflicting, destructive realities. Ava knew she had to move faster. She couldn't wait for Ethan to come to his senses completely. She had to take a bigger risk to ensure Mr. Davies couldn't use that document against her. Ava walked toward Mr. Davies's open briefcase. She saw the official stamp of his law firm left behind when he had pulled out the documents. With a swift, unnoticed movement while Davies was busy arguing with Ethan, Ava took the stamp and hid it in her jacket pocket. She glanced toward the exit. Leo was not in sight. He was probably waiting outside or in the garage. Ava knew she couldn't stay in this house for another minute. But she couldn't just leave without ensuring her final bullet was ready to be fired. Ava walked to the kitchen, grabbed a small bottle of lighter fluid belonging to Ethan from an upper cabinet, and slipped it into her work bag. Her mind was no longer on peace. If this house was a predator's den, she would make sure there was nowhere for them to hide when the day was over. "I'm leaving now, Ethan," Ava said to her still-frozen husband. "I'm going to the police station with this document." Ava walked out the front door, but she didn't head for the street. She stopped beside Ethan's car, opened the driver's door where she had planted the recorder last night, and quickly retrieved the small memory card from the device. She then got into her own car, the one with the sabotaged brakes, but she didn't start the engine. She just sat in the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel tightly, waiting for the reaction from inside. She knew Leo would appear any moment. Ava reached into her bag, ensuring the lighter fluid and the law firm stamp were still there. She made one last phone call to a number she had long avoided, the number of an investigative journalist who had been an old friend of her late father. The air inside the dead car cabin felt suffocating. Though the window was cracked open, Ava gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white. Her eyes were fixed on the front door of the house she had just left. She knew that behind those solid walls, a storm was tearing apart what was left of their family. Her work bag felt heavy on the passenger seat, containing the lighter fluid, the stolen stamp, and the recording that had just blown Mr. Davies's lies wide open. Ava felt a vibration under her feet, not from her car's engine, which she had deliberately left off, but from a motorcycle that sped up and stopped abruptly at the gate. Leo. Through the tinted window, Ava saw him dismount with unsteady steps. He threw his helmet carelessly onto the lawn. His denim jacket looked dirty, and even from this distance, an aggressive aura emanated from his every move. Leo had just returned from a gambling den, where he usually blew the operational money his mother gave him. Ava reactivated the audio monitor on her phone. The sound of the front door slamming was painful through the small speaker. "Where's the money, Mom? The loan shark is waiting at the end of the block." Leo's voice was hoarse, broken by panic and residual alcohol. Ethan, still standing stiffly after hearing the recording of Mr. Davies's betrayal, turned to his brother with a dazed look. "What money, Leo? Didn't you hear what just happened in here?" "I don't care what happened," Leo snapped, stumbling toward the dining table, ignoring the presence of Mr. Davies, who was trying to pack his briefcase and flee. "Mom said if this project succeeded, I'd get a big cut. She said Ava would be gone soon and all the assets would be freed up. I did my part with the car. Now where's the money?" The words, project and car hung in the air like a toxic gas about to explode. Ethan strode forward and grabbed the collar of Leo's jacket. His usually calm face was now a mask of rage mixed with horror. "What project? What do you mean? The car?" "Leo, Answer me. Leo laughed bitterly, a hollow sound. Just ask your precious mother, big brother. She arranged everything. I'm just the mechanic following orders. She said Ava had to be removed because she controlled too much. That's enough, Leo. Helen's voice cut sharply. Ava, listening from inside the car, held her breath. She watched through the hidden camera as Helen walked toward her two sons. The woman no longer looked like a breathless victim. Her eyes were sharp. But in an instant, like a scene change in a play, she transformed her expression to one of deep sorrow. Helen dropped to her knees in front of Ethan, hugging her eldest son's legs. Ethan, don't listen to him. Your brother is drunk. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Helen sobbed, her voice so fragile it made the enraged Ethan begin to waver. Leo is under pressure, Ethan. He's stressed because Ava constantly belittles him for being unemployed. She always makes him feel like trash in this house. But he said, about the car. Mom, about a project to make Ava go away. Ethan yelled, his voice hoarse. Helen looked up, manufactured tears streaming down her cheeks. It was a figure of speech, Ethan. I only told Leo to find a new work project so he could be independent and not constantly be trampled by Ava's sky-high pride. About the car. Leo was just fixing Ava's car because she kept complaining about it. He just wanted to help, but he gets accused of all sorts of things by your paranoid wife. Ava bit her lip until it bled inside her car. Helen's manipulation was so slick. She twisted the act of sabotage into a misunderstood offer of help. She used Leo's weakness and Ethan's pride as weapons. Ethan, you've seen for yourself how Ava has treated us lately, Helen continued, her voice now a soft, sweet poison. She records us. She plants spies. She treats this house like a prison. Leo is going crazy because he feels constantly watched by your wife. He turns to gambling because he can't stand the pressure Ava puts on him in this house. Ava is the one who broke your brother, Ethan. Ava is the one destroying this family. Ethan released his grip on Leo. He backed away slowly, shaking his head. He was trapped at a crossroads between the audio evidence he had just heard and his mother's emotional defense, which had been ingrained in his brain for decades. Ava saw Ethan starting to yield. She saw her husband helping Helen to her feet. The hatred that had just ignited for his mother was now shifting back to doubt about Ava. Asterisk, I have to stop this now. Asterisk. Ava's mind screamed. She realized that as long as she was outside, she could never win this war of narratives. Helen would always find a way to make Ava look like the monster in Ethan's eyes. The conflict inside Ava peaked. She knew her car was a death trap. She knew its brakes had been sliced by Leo. If she started it and moved, she would be risking her life. But if she just sat there, Ethan would return completely to the monster's embrace. And this time, they wouldn't let her survive until morning. Ava grabbed her phone and sent one last message to Detective Miller. Asterisk, they're starting to twist the facts. I have to show them physical proof they can't deny with words. Asterisk, Ava put her phone in her pocket. She took the bottle of lighter fluid from her bag, but instead of putting it away, she opened it slightly until the pungent smell filled the cabin. She needed a drama bigger than Helen's theatrics. She needed something that would force Ethan to see with his own eyes, not just his ears. Ava took a long, deep breath, staring at the front door that now looked like the mouth of a giant, ready to swallow her whole. She knew Ethan was watching from the window, or at least listening. With a hand that was cold but steady, Ava put the key into the ignition of her sabotaged car. She knew she wouldn't get far. She just needed to make one move that would prove the truth right in front of her husband's eyes, even if it meant being inside a vehicle that couldn't stop. Ava turned the key. The engine purred softly. Inside the house, she could see Leo's silhouette turning toward the window, his face pale, realizing his target was on the move. Ava released the parking brake. She didn't press the gas pedal hard. She just let the car roll slowly out of the garage and down the small incline in front of their gate, right in front of Ethan, who now appeared in the doorway, his face confused. Ava looked into Ethan's eyes through the windshield. She lifted her foot, showing that she was trying to stomp on the brake pedal, but the car kept rolling, its speed beginning to increase due to gravity. She didn't scream. She just looked at Ethan with a gaze that seemed to say, "Look what they did to me." Ava deliberately let the car roll, not toward the main road, but toward the concrete fence across the street. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and braced for the impact she had designed herself. The sound of the car's metal crunching against the concrete fence left a long, ringing sound in Ava's ears. Thin smoke billowed from the crumpled hood, but Ava felt no physical pain, only a profound emptiness as she watched Ethan run toward her, his face pale. He tried to help her out, his hands trembling, while on the porch, Helen and Leo stood frozen, like two spectators, watching a show that hadn't gone according to script. Ava brushed Ethan's hand away as soon as her feet touched the ground. She hadn't fainted. She wasn't crying. With a steady, though slightly limping, gait, she walked toward the front door, dragging her work bag, which she still clutched tightly. "Ava, you need to go to the hospital. The brakes really failed," Ethan yelled, his voice breaking with hysteria. Ava stopped at the doorway, turned, and looked at Ethan with eyes so cold he fell silent. "Get inside, Ethan. All of you, get inside. There's a trial I need to finish in this house." The living room, once a place of fake laughter, had turned into a suffocating interrogation room. Ava sat in a single armchair, while Ethan, Helen, and Leo sat on the long sofa. Mr. Davies had long since vanished after the audio recording incident. Ava took her laptop from her bag and placed it on the coffee table. Her fingers moved nimbly, while her chest felt tight with a soul-tearing conflict. She had loved this house. She had once loved these people. But tonight, she would destroy it all for her right to live. "Ava, dear, I'm truly in shock." "How could the car?" Helen began her act, her voice trembling with the maternal tone that had been Ava's poison. "Be quiet, Helen," Ava cut her off sharply. "Don't waste your energy on acting anymore. I have something more interesting than your tears." Ava pressed play. The laptop screen showed the black and white footage from the garage camera. There, clearly visible, was Leo crawling under her car, meticulously slicing the brake line. Their voices came through the extra speaker Ava had prepared. Asterisk. "Done, Mom. When she brakes hard on the downhill, the hydraulic pressure will make it rupture instantly." Asterisk. Leo's face turned ashen. He tried to stand, but Ethan grabbed his arm with incredible force, keeping him seated. Ethan stared at the screen, his eyes wide, his breath coming in ragged gasps like a wounded bull. But Ava wasn't finished. She played the second recording, the whispers from behind the door on that first night. Asterisk. Ethan must not know. Once Ava is gone, we'll have full access. Leo, make sure it looks like an accident, just like his father. Asterisk. The room grew frigid. Ethan released his grip on Leo and turned to his mother. His gaze was no longer that of an obedient son, but of a man who had just realized he had been embracing a venomous snake for 10 years. "Mom," Ethan's voice was a deathly whisper. "You killed Dad, and now you wanted to kill my wife." Helen was silent for a moment. Her maternal mask cracked and then shattered. Her wrinkled face twisted into a snarl. She was no longer sobbing. She let out a small, dry laugh, full of the hatred she had suppressed for so long. "Your wife is a nuisance, Ethan!" Helen suddenly exploded, standing and pointing a trembling finger at Ava. "She controlled all your money. She ran this house like she owned it. She wanted to throw Leo out on the street. I was just taking back what belongs to our family." "By killing people?" Ethan screamed, tears now streaming down his face. "Your father was just as weak as you, Ethan. He wanted to leave me for another woman and divide our assets. I had no choice." Helen had now completely lost control. Her eyes were wild. She turned to Ava with pure, sociopathic hatred. "And you witch? You think you've won because you have this stupid video?" Unexpectedly, Helen lunged across the table, trying to grab Ava's throat. Her strength, fueled by madness and frustration, was extraordinary for a woman her age. Leo tried to intervene but was shoved aside. Ava recoiled, trying to defend herself, while Ethan struggled to restrain his raging mother. "Mom, stop! You're insane!" Ethan cried. At that moment, the front door was kicked open. Chloe entered with 2 plainclothes police officers. One of them was Detective Miller, who had been monitoring a live feed from the hidden cameras via Chloe's phone. "Let her go!" Detective Miller commanded in a booming voice. The police quickly apprehended Helen, who was still struggling and cursing at Ava. Leo was also taken into custody without a fight, slumping in defeat, realizing his escape from gambling debts had ended in a jail cell. Ethan collapsed to the floor, covering his face and sobbing uncontrollably. The world he knew, his saintly mother, his slightly mischievous brother, had crumbled into disgusting ruins of betrayal. Ava stood in the corner, her breath ragged. She watched Helen get dragged out of the house. As she passed Ava, Helen paused, giving her a look that promised revenge. "You will never be at peace, Ava," she hissed, before the police led her away. Chloe went to Ava, wrapping an arm around her trembling shoulders. "It's over, Ava. You're safe now." Ava looked around the wrecked living room. She saw Ethan, still broken on the floor. Her heart ached. She had won her life, but she had lost her marriage. The safety she had secured tonight felt hollow, because she knew this house would never feel like home again. The police began collecting evidence, including Ava's laptop and the unlabeled pill bottle she had secured. Ethan looked up, his eyes meeting Ava's, full of a deep, pleading apology and shame. "Ava, I'm so sorry. I was so blind," Ethan whispered hoarsely. Ava just looked at her husband for a long time, then turned her face away. She offered no reply. She walked to the desk in the corner of the room and picked up a brown envelope she had prepared that afternoon. Inside was not just legal evidence, but something else. Ava took Ethan's car keys from the table, then walked to her small bag. She took out one memory card she hadn't given to the police, a card containing a recording of Ethan's conversations where he had doubted her in the preceding nights. Ava slipped the card into her pocket. Then she turned to Chloe. "Chloe, I can't stay here tonight. Please take me to a hotel," Ava said softly but firmly. Ava walked out of the house, ignoring Ethan's pleas for her to stay. As she crossed the police line in front of her house, she saw her wrecked car. She paused, opened the back door, and retrieved a small box of her mother's heirloom jewelry, which she had kept in a hidden compartment. Ava clutched the box tightly and got into Chloe's car. In the darkness of the moving car, Ava reached into her pocket, pulled out the law firm's stamp she had taken from Mr. Davies, and threw it out the window into the dark bushes by the side of the road. She knew the legal battle had just begun, and Helen wasn't the type to give up behind bars. The fluorescent lights in the police station lobby flickered, creating a painful rhythm inside Ava's head. The smell of cheap instant coffee and cigarette smoke from the interrogation rooms was thick, tightening a chest that already felt crushed. Ava sat on a hard plastic bench, her eyes fixed on the closed door of an examination room. Inside, the family she had served was being flayed, one, by reality. Chloe sat beside her, vigilant, phone in hand, ensuring all digital evidence was uploaded to a secure server. "One more step, Ava. You're past the hardest part," Chloe whispered, trying to offer what little strength Ava had left. Soon, the door opened. A middle-aged man in a rumpled shirt came out, walking with a weary gait. He was Detective Reynolds, a senior investigator whose face looked like it had seen every kind of human depravity. He approached Ava, carrying a file folder. "Miss Ava," Reynolds called, his voice heavy but tinged with sympathy. "Your brother-in-law, Leo, just signed his official statement. He confessed to everything. He's terrified. He said he was just following orders and that all the operational funds, including the plan to sabotage the breaks last night, came from Helen. He's trying to trade his testimony for a lighter sentence." Ava closed her eyes. Even though she already knew, hearing the official confession felt like being stabbed with 1,000 needles. And Helen? Reynolds sighed heavily, the lines of exhaustion on his forehead deepening. "Your mother-in-law is a tough one. She's denying all accusations. She insists Leo is hallucinating from drug or gambling problems and claims your recordings are digital fabrications. She even tried to attack a female officer inside." Ava wasn't surprised. Helen wasn't just a manipulator. She was someone who had lost all contact with guilt. If she had also killed Ethan's father 10 years ago, then lying to the police was child's play. Suddenly, Ethan emerged from another room. His face was shattered, his eyes red and swollen. He was a far cry from the well-dressed, composed man he usually was. Upon seeing Ava, Ethan stopped, his legs seemingly unable to support his own weight. He staggered toward her bench, and then, suddenly, he fell to his knees on the cold cement floor, right in front of his wife. Ava, Ethan couldn't finish his sentence. His voice broke into horrific sobs, the sound of a man whose world had just ended. Leo told me everything. He told me how Mom planned the hit and run, how she laughed when she knew your car's brakes were cut. All this time, I protected her, Ava. I yelled at you to protect a monster. Ava looked down at the top of her husband's head. A flicker of pity arose, but it was buried under layers of frozen anger and disappointment. Ethan's regret felt far too late. She's your mother, Ethan. It's natural you wanted to believe in her, Ava said, her voice flat, almost emotionless. But your inability to hear my voice almost ended with me in a grave. You were more afraid of hurting your mother's feelings than you were of losing my life. Ethan looked up, his face wet with tears. I'll do anything to fix this, Ava. I'll testify against her. I'll revoke all the legal access Davies requested. I will, Ethan. Ava cut him off coldly. Don't make promises to me. Make them to your father, who died on the same downhill where they planned for me to die. For 10 years, you lived with the lie that it was a pure accident. That is the greatest betrayal of all. Ethan bowed his head again, his shoulders shaking. At the same time, another officer came out carrying Leo's impounded work bag. Inside, a few land deeds and pieces of jewelry were visible jewelry Ava recognized as her late mother's, which had gone missing a few months ago. Fresh anger sparked in Ava's heart. Helen hadn't just wanted to kill her. She had already started plundering Ava's parents' legacy before she was even gone. Her mother-in-law's sociopathy truly had no bottom. Ava stood, ignoring Ethan, who was still kneeling on the floor. She approached Detective Miller, who had just finished speaking with the digital forensics team. Sir, there's one more thing, Ava said. There's a lawyer named Davies. He holds a draft document declaring me insane. I'm certain he also has Helen's illicit financial records. I want him prosecuted as well. We've already issued a summons for Mr. Davies, Miss Ava, Miller replied firmly. But for now, we need you to give an additional statement about the history of verbal threats made by Helen. Ava nodded. As she was about to follow Miller to an interrogation room, she saw Helen being led by 2 female officers to a temporary holding cell at the back of the station. Helen stopped for a moment when she saw Ava. No tears, no remorse. The old woman gave her a piercing stare, a look that promised this wasn't over. You think you've won, Ava? Helen whispered as she passed, just loud enough for Ava to hear. Ethan will never escape my shadow. You've only destroyed the man you love. Ava didn't reply. She kept walking, her head held high. But in her heart, she knew those words held some truth. Ethan was already broken, and their relationship might never recover from the ashes of this betrayal. After giving her statement for 3 hours, Ava left the police station as the sky was turning purple. Chloe was waiting for her in the car. Ethan was still sitting in a corner of the lobby, alone, staring at the floor with a vacant expression. Ava approached him, standing a few feet away. I'm staying at Chloe's apartment for a while. Don't look for me, Ethan. You need to sort things out with the law and with your own soul. Ava, please don't leave me alone to face this, Ethan pleaded. Ava looked at her husband one last time that night. You're not alone, Ethan. You have the truth now. It's a much more honest companion than your mother ever was. Ava turned and got into Chloe's car. As the car started moving, Ava opened her bag and took out the one item she hadn't turned over to the police, a small key she had found in Leo's jacket pocket during their struggle. The key had a tag with a locker number at the inner-city bus terminal. Ava didn't know what was inside, but her instincts told her Leo had hidden his personal insurance there, just in case his mother betrayed him. Without saying a word to Chloe or the police, Ava slipped the key deep into her wallet. As the car passed the police station gates, Ava saw Mr. Davies's car parked across the street, its lights off, as if monitoring the situation. Ava didn't panic. Instead, she lowered the window, letting Davies see her face, which was no longer filled with fear. Ava grabbed her phone and sent a short text to an unknown number, a number she had found in the secret contacts of Helen's phone the night before. Asterisk, I have the key to the locker. Meet me tomorrow morning if you don't want your name showing up in the next police report. Asterisk. Ava put her phone away and leaned back in the car seat. She realized that to truly destroy Helen's spiderweb, she had to start playing in the gray area she had always avoided. The risk she was taking now was far greater than a mere domestic dispute. But for Ava, it was the only way to ensure there would be no more accidents on any downhill road in her life. Locker number 214 at the intercity bus terminal creaked as Ava opened it. Inside, she found a small metal box containing a stack of old letters and a bank passbook in Ethan's father's name that had never been reported in the inheritance. But the most valuable item was an old cassette tape insurance Leo had kept to blackmail his own mother. It contained Helen's hysterical confession shortly after Ethan's father's accident 10 years ago. Her voice, so cold and without remorse, became the final nail in the coffin of her crimes. 3 months later, the district court was silent, though the courtroom was filled with whispers. Ava sat on a hard wooden bench, staring at the backs of Helen and Leo, who wore orange prison jumpsuits. There were no more neat hair buns or suffocating jasmine scents. Helen looked frail, but her eyes still burned with the same hatred as the judge read the verdict, sentencing Defendant 1, Helen, to 15 years in prison, and Defendant 2, Leo Pratama, to 10 years. Ava closed her eyes. She felt a massive weight lift from her shoulders. But strangely, there was no cheer in her heart, only a vast emptiness. In the back row, she saw a dejected Mr. Davies. His law license had just been officially revoked by the Bar Association after Chloe leaked evidence of bribery and medical document manipulation to the public. He was no longer a feared, cunning lawyer, but a defeated man who had lost his future. After the trial, Ava walked to the courthouse's barren garden. Ethan was waiting for her there. He looked much older than his actual age. His hair was starting to gray at the temples, and his eyes, once full of love, now held only shame and devastation. "They got what they deserved, Ava," Ethan said in a hoarse voice. He tried to step closer, but Ava instinctively took a step back, creating an invisible but thick barrier. "Justice has been served, Ethan. But justice can't resurrect trust that's already dead," Ava replied calmly. Ethan looked at her with pleading eyes. "I know I was wrong. I've cleared the house of every memory of her. I want us to start over, Ava. From scratch. I'll make up for every second of doubt I ever had." Ava looked at the overcast sky. A great struggle was taking place within her. A part of her, the part that still remembered the happy times when they were newly married, wanted to forgive, to return to his embrace, and pretend this was all a bad dream. But the other part, the part that had nearly died under a sabotaged car, reminded her that Ethan was the gate that let the monster in. "Ethan," Ava said softly, but each word held unwavering firmness. "I loved you. Maybe I still do. But every time I look at your face, I see Helen's. I remember your voice calling me insane when I was fighting for my life. This wound isn't just about what they did, but about what you didn't do when I needed you most." Ava reached into her bag and pulled out a blue folder. She placed it on the park bench between them. "These are the divorce papers. I've already signed them." Ethan froze, his already fractured world completely shattered. "Ava, please don't do this. You're all I have now." "That's the problem, Ethan. You only have me because the monsters are gone, not because you chose me from the beginning," Ava said, a single tear finally escaping, which she quickly wiped away. "I need to heal myself. I need to live in a house where I don't have to check my car's brakes every morning. I want peace, Ethan. And that peace isn't beside you." Ava turned and left Ethan, who had collapsed onto the bench, crying silently. Ava's steps felt light, yet heavy with history. She got into a new car she had bought with her own hard-earned money, a vehicle whose safety she had independently verified. That afternoon, Ava returned to her late father's old house, the house Helen had wanted to seize. It was now clean. Chloe had helped her repaint the walls a fresh white, throwing out everything that Ethan's family had ever touched. Ava sat on the porch, sipping tea without fear of poison or sabotage. She had won the legal war. She had imprisoned the sociopath who destroyed her family, and she had freed herself from a toxic marriage. But as she looked at her newly repaired front gate, she saw an unfamiliar black car parked across the street. The driver didn't get out, just sat there for a few minutes before slowly driving away. Ava remembered that even though Helen was in prison, she still had old networks who might not be happy with Mr. Davies's downfall. Ava put down her teacup. She no longer trembled. She went inside, locked the door with 3 different deadbolts, and activated the new CCTV system she had installed herself. She realized that healing was a long process, and her newfound independence demanded a vigilance that could never be relaxed. She walked to her desk, opened her laptop, and began to write about her experience to help other women who might be trapped in similar situations. But her fingers stopped when an email from an anonymous address arrived. It contained a single, short sentence that made the hair on her arms stand up. Asterisk, prison walls have ears, and a mother never forgets how to settle a score. Asterisk. Ava was silent for a moment, staring at the screen with steady breath. She didn't delete the message. Instead, she took a photo of it and sent it directly to Detective Miller. She then closed her laptop, turned off the living room light, and walked to her bedroom in a darkness that now felt like a friend, not a foe. She took out the small folding knife that was now always under her pillow, a small, risky decision for her mental health, but crucial for her safety. Ava closed her eyes, embracing the expensive silence, ready to face a new dawn that might still carry old shadows. Her story with Ethan's family might have ended on paper, but her struggle to stand tall on her own had just begun. Thank you for following Ava's emotional journey to the end. Through this drama, we learn that the greatest courage is not when we fight external enemies, but when we dare to acknowledge the bitter truth about the people we love most. A piece of advice for all of us: never ignore your intuition when you feel something is wrong, because trust should not make us blind, and true love will never ask you to sacrifice your safety and self-worth. Continue to stand bravely in your truth, because inner peace can only be achieved when we dare to let go of what damages our soul. May Ava's story inspire anyone struggling in darkness to find the light of their own independence. Warmest regards, and see you in the next works.